Om Shanti. For the great majority, although there's still some more precious days left in Madhuban, but the thought is the departure is imminent. Today, tomorrow, the next day, a few days from now. And always there's the question in the mind, am I going to be able to sustain my stage when I'm out there? Especially if Madhuban's been a time of blessings and happiness and flying, then that makes the question even more pertinent. Am I going to be able to maintain this? And many of you know my story, but I just like to pick out a few things from it very briefly. When I'd come into Gyan, I'd been in India for a few months at that point. And after coming into Gyan, it was very fast to decide I want to surrender. And there were only centres in India, there were no centres abroad, and so that meant staying in Bharat, which was fine. I was very happy and comfortable with that. And just a few months after surrender, Sakar Baba was no more Sakar. He was Avyakt. And the scene had changed quite considerably. People in India, some of them at that time thought, well, we should call everyone from all the centres and we now sit in Madhuban and do our final bit of tapasya. Really? 1969, January. And then, of course, Avyakt Baba said, that's not what you have to do. You have to go back out there and carry on with the service, and Baba's going to continue to come to meet you in the Avyakt form. And a few months later, I found myself back in Madhuban for one of Baba's dreams. It had been Baba's dreams to have Kumari's training happen. And at first the idea had been Delhi, and Baba had changed that and made it Madhuban so that Baba would personally, with his guidance, influence that and make sure that the Kumaris were well cared for. And so the training section has been built for that purpose, literally, the training of the Kumaris. And in between, whilst the training building was still under construction, the angel flew off. But the training continued. The building got constructed and the training then happened. And I came back to Madhuban, May 69. And much to my surprise, there was something else at that point that was happening. Daddy Janki was having dreams. And Daddy's dreams were of world service. And she'd never been abroad. I think she'd been on an aeroplane once. And that's it. But she had this vision of service abroad. And she said to me, you have to go back. And I said, why? And she said, for service. I said, Daddy, there's no service out there. And she said, there's lots of people waiting for Baba's message. I said, Daddy, they're too caught up in all their Lokik things and their materialistic things. And in London especially, people are too occupied. They don't want to hear these things. But her vision was of service. And then Avyakt Baba said to me, you have to go. And from my face, well, anyway, Baba knew I didn't want to go. But Baba then said, Baba's not sending you for karmic accounts. Baba's sending you for service. And then Baba paused and then said, all you have to do is follow the Madhuban timetable. And if you follow the Madhuban timetable, everything will be fine. And I took that on board. And what Baba meant, then a month later, I was back in London. And I found that it was this mantra from Baba that helped me. Just follow Madhuban timetable. And that meant Amrit Vela. And it's wonderful if you, when you awaken, you remember that that's the time of blessings. Because no matter how many blessings you've had, you always need more. And so the feeling was, yes, I want Baba's blessings. And so that would be the motivation to get me up. And then Baba's Murli. And then Karma Yoga through the day, whatever it is you need to do. But then, again, time for service. But also, again, at night, very important part of the whole day. Show your account to Baba. Let Baba see your chart and your account sheet. And then, having put it in front of Baba and taken guidance from Baba, then close the day. And then the sleep will be a very sweet sleep. And it'll be a sleep in which even in a few hours there's much refreshment experienced, so that then the next day can begin with Baba's blessings again. And I found that very basic, very simple instruction was actually something that helped me survive. There was no center. The nearest one was 5,000 miles away. And at that age, you don't think of your mother as being company. Somehow. So my mother was in Gyan, but nobody else around me. But that wasn't really company, but of course it was. But basically it was the Madhuban timetable that kept me going. And then there was another mantra that came from anonymous. I don't even know who sent me that letter, because there wasn't a proper office set up in Madhuban at that time. Ishuben's office was there, as it still is today, and Ishuben was at the desk with Sakar Baba and then later with Dadi Kumarka and Didi. But there was no English post office. Ishuben handled all the Hindi post. And so I think whoever happened to be in Madhuban would see the letters if they were in English, and then Dadiji or Dadi Janki would give them a reply, and the reply would come. So who wrote it, I don't even know. But enough, it came from Madhuban, because I was 20. By then I was 20 years old, and I had done no bhakti in this birth, and here was I trying to contact all the established spiritual organizations in London and go meet them, go talk to them, and they just laugh. Literally, they just laugh. And I didn't have a single piece of printed material I could show them, so there was no external support of any type whatsoever. And when they'd ask me questions from their own bhakti background, I had no answers for them. I hadn't studied bhakti, and it just wasn't enough for them. And it was great for me because it meant that my ego was gradually being knocked until it got killed. That was the best of the whole thing. So for 2 years, when you keep trying and nothing seems to happen, then it's a great lesson. But the lesson that came after just a few months of trying and nothing happening, and that was, even if there's no service, because that was my letter to Madhuban, there's no service, nobody wants to listen. And so the letter came back, there's always self-service. And that was my saving lifeline, because somehow it touched me deeply, and I got into that mode of self-service, And I treated that period in which there was very little external service as a time for self-service. And what I did in terms of that period were two things: lots and lots and lots of study. And today, drama doesn't give me the opportunity to sit down and pick up Purity and read it, or any other literature basically. I usually carry a stack of stuff with me for the plane, but even so I never managed to get through it all. And so morning time, what I study is what I study. But at that time, study became the foundation for my life. Actually sitting and reading and thinking and writing. And also yoga. Study and yoga. In terms of the yoga, I had a very simple calculation that I was very aware of. And that was, by then, I knew that the Dadis had already had 30 plus years of yoga. And I had only just started. And if I wanted to catch up, I had a lot of catching up to do. And I did want to catch up. I did want to have powerful yoga. And I just knew that I had to put in extra time for yoga if I wanted to protect myself from the vibrations that were around me and all the old pulls and distractions and friends that were still very much there in London. And I knew that yoga would be both protection for me, but yoga would also be my foundation. And yoga would enable me to maintain my stability. And I wanted that. I had made a decision that I wanted to belong to God, and I didn't want anything to distract me from that. And yet I knew that it was all too easy after a year's gyan and no one else around you to sustain you. It could have been very easy to be distracted. But I knew that the gyan and yoga would be my foundation. And so when the message came from Madhuban, and I literally took it to heart, I set myself a timetable in which I was doing this. Today, not so easy for all of you, just to focus on study and yoga and nothing else, because you've got lots of service opportunities in front of you, and service can be a distraction, but equally service is fortune. And secondly, you've also got Lokik responsibilities. I didn't have too many of those. Yes, there were certain things that I had to fulfill, but not a huge burden. And so I was able to give time to all of this. And so I'm acknowledging that you don't have the same sort of time as I did at that point. But the motivation was what kept me alive. I knew that it was all too easy to allow other things to touch me and be pulled into other things. And so I knew I needed Baba's safety and Baba's protection. And I was going to make sure that I kept that with my own effort, because there was nobody else I could turn to and rely on. And I didn't know how long it would be before I would make it to Madhuban. And as it turned out, it was about 2.5 years that I wasn't able to come to Madhuban. So that period was quite a stretch. And I didn't know at that time how long it was going to be, but I knew it would be long. And so I knew that I had to make sure that I found a way to take Baba's help to sustain myself. I don't think I used the word sustenance for myself. I used the word protection for myself, because that's what it felt like, that I needed God's protection. And then recently, when we've been talking about sustenance in terms of the family, and the question always comes up, it's easy to create service, go somewhere, give a lecture, and there'll be people who are interested. the atmosphere of the world has changed in the last 30 years, and so people today need peace, want peace, are ready to hear about it. It's very easy to start service. And then the question comes, how do you sustain it? And it was some years ago when there was a Madhuban Bhatti for senior teachers. I wasn't here, I was in London, but Dadi Janki had conducted the Bhatti here. And when she came back, I was very curious what was it that had come up within the meeting. And she said, the most important thing that came out was that there first has to be sustenance of the self. And only if you can sustain yourself are you going to be qualified to sustain anybody else. And why it is service in many places runs into trouble, because there's the thought of giving, but there isn't the thought of sustaining the self and being full, so that then there is that automatic impact in which others can be sustained. And so self-sustenance is something that I've come to appreciate very deeply. And I look back and I realize that that's what was happening with Baba's touching, that made me create a timetable for myself in which I did not give myself opportunity for free time. It's absolutely true where they say that an empty mind is the devil's workshop. An empty mind doesn't suddenly get filled with God's light and God's love. An empty mind absorbs all the negativity of the atmosphere of Kali Yuga, or looks for distractions in Kali Yuga. And so to keep the mind occupied in the right way is very, very crucial. Recently, somebody had a question for Dadi Gulzar, and the question was, they go through all sorts of fluctuations. One moment, everything is fine, and they feel very confident. I now know my sanskars, and I can really deal with my sanskars. It's been a long journey, but now I know what my sanskars are like, and I can deal with them. And maybe that stage lasts for a week or a month, however long, but then suddenly a little thing will happen, and the little thing will become a big thing, and they're gone. And when Maya comes, it comes very fast, and the turnaround is visible on their face, on their behavior, in their words, in everything. And they know that they've been hit and knocked out, and somehow then they'll pick themselves up and make the effort and again try. A good thing, they've never given up. They've always, again, you know where Baba says, where you fall and again you stand, there's a song. That the days of the journey are long, but you stand and you fall and you stand again. So very much that story. So this person had told Dadi Gulzar that in essence that this is what was going on, but now they were really tired of going back and moving forward and going back again. And so what could they now do? And Dadi Gulzar's answer was to use a yukti that Baba has given, which is keep a timetable for the mind. Set your mind in terms of self-respect on the level that you want to set it for the whole day. And then through the day, keep going back and checking, am I fulfilling that timetable? And so Amrit Vela, celebrate the meeting with Baba, and after the meeting with Baba, just cast your eye over the timetable that you know is ahead of you, and sometimes you don't even know in terms of physical time where you're going to be, what you're going to be doing. Things are so fluid. But sometimes you do know what's up in terms of the physical timetable in front of you. And sometimes you even know not even just the physical timetable, you know a little bit the challenges that are going to be coming up in front of you. you're meeting X, Y, and Z, and there's always usually a little bit of friction when you meet them, or you're meeting A, B, and C, and you know that your intellect gets very pulled by the things they say, and you get very easily impressed or influenced by them. So you know yourself, and you know who are the people you're likely to be meeting. And so to a certain extent, you know what's ahead of you. Or you know that there's going to be a crucial meeting in which decisions are going to be made that are quite difficult. And so again, there's a certain amount of awareness that you can have and preparation that you can make. And so where it's specific in that way, then it's very easy to set your inner timetable in terms of what it is you need to keep in your consciousness to deal with those people or those situations. And so actively, consciously, immerse that in your awareness, what your timetable holds, what you think it'll bring, and then the relevant preparation. You know you're going to need Baba's canopy of protection. You know you're going to need that stage where maybe it's compassion and mercy that you adopt so that you don't react in a negative way to somebody. So certain things like that you can deal with. And sometimes you don't know how the day is going to unfold. Even if you know the physical timetable, you think it's just going to be a normal, another day, and you don't think there's going to be anything special or specific out of the ordinary happening. Yet still, even on those days, what's the preparation? Now, in terms of this message from Baba, not just set your mind in terms of your timetable, you've heard Baba say this before, but set your mind in terms of self-respect for the whole day. Which means, even if I don't know the specifics, if I know the specifics, it's much easier to prepare, but I don't know the specifics. And so it means that in a very general way, a very loose timetable would be early morning, I'm going to stay in the intoxication of being a godly student. Can be as simple as this, nothing more complicated. But listen to Baba's Murli in that awareness of being a godly student and the awareness of God teaching you, and your whole feeling as you receive the Murli is quite different to just picking up your notebook and racing down to the center, or if you're living in the center, just racing into class. Very different. But the preparation, the timetable. Create the awareness that you need to create. Be in that consciousness, in that special awareness. And then through the day, I'm going to be Baba's friend. I'm going to make Baba my companion and be Baba's friend today. Another day, through the day, I'm going to make sure that Baba is my Satguru. Baba is my guide. And I'm going to keep checking back with the Satguru, with the guide, what it is I need to do. Another day, I'm going to be a donor, Baba's Murli. Through the whole day, I'm going to keep checking, am I giving or am I taking? I'm going to be a donor. I'm going to let Baba fill me so that then I can give something to everyone I come into contact with. And so different things that you can pick up from Baba's Murli, you can pick up from Gyan, but to use that idea to set your mind on that state of self-esteem, self-respect, in that awareness. And the day will have a very different energy. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to see the benefit you've experienced by keeping your mind on the right track. Now, this is where the whole question about intellect comes in. this morning somebody said, could we look at the subject of the intellect? In the sense that when I sit in silence and I look inside and see what's going on within I, this point of light, I, this infinitesimal tiny dot, the soul. And you can't cut the soul and say A, B, and C. But just in terms of trying to understand how things work, then we use these labels. There's the mind, there are the thoughts, then there's the intellect, and that's the ability to discern, the ability to judge, to discriminate, whichever word I use, the conscience, the receptacle. Yesterday Baba spoke about having a clean, golden, pure vessel in which you're able to keep all the invaluable jewels. And so today this question about intellect coming up. And in terms of how I set my timetable through the day, it's not just thinking about it, it's programming my buddhi, it's programming my intellect. So that in the early morning, I decide how I want to approach the day, what it is I'm going to be experimenting with through the day, and it's the buddhi that makes this decision. And this is the buddhi with gyan, with divinity, influenced by God, so that in that moment of total clarity in the early morning, I make my decision. And then through the day, other influences of course will come, but I'm going to keep connecting with the buddhi, like Baba said, then through the day keep checking that this is what you're doing. The mind is going to be pulled here and there, but the buddhi doesn't need to be pulled. If I'm protecting my buddhi is going to protect my life. Which means that in terms of gyan, where is gyan stored? At the point where gyan becomes stored in my sanskars, I'm Satu Pradhan, I can go home. Which means that the automatic, the natural reaction, response in every situation is from gyan, because my sanskars are now totally clean, Satu Pradhan, and I've filled myself with such depth of knowledge so that the response is always of gyan. You can see that that level of Satoguni is the stage that we are aspiring to. But at this point, my sanskars aren't totally filled with gyan. I understand gyan, but my sanskars aren't yet filled with gyan. My reactions indicate otherwise. And so sometimes it's gyan, sometimes it's definitely agyan, without gyan. And I can see it happening. I can see that that's what I'm doing, and yet I'm not changing it. So the lesson to be learned there. So where is gyan stored at this point? Gyan is stored in my buddhi, in this vessel. And whilst gyan is stored there, my life is going to stay safe. And what is it that doesn't allow gyan to be stored in the buddhi? Misusing my divine intellect, abusing my divine intellect. When we come to Baba, the gift that God gives us is of the divine intellect. Whether it's been my bhakti, my love for God, my love for truth, whatever it is that's brought me to this point. Thank you, Baba. Thank you, Drama. Thank you, my fortune. Now I recognize, Baba, I'm God's child. My intellect is touched. I recognized God. Without a divine intellect, I couldn't have. And so it's a gift that God gave me so that I was able to recognize Him and know Him. And now my task, to make sure that I keep this vessel of mine very clean and pure. And in the first instance, purity and diet, you can see how people who actually intellectually like Gyan but don't ever become Brahmins, it's very difficult for them to accepting celibacy, then it's very difficult for them to actually truly comprehend what Baba is saying and to use Baba's Gyan in their life. Good intellects, clever people, and they love the family, but somehow they're not becoming proper Brahmins, and so it's this inability to follow purity and the connection of the intellect. The divine intellect is telling me purity is important, and if I follow that through, then my intellect is kept safe and becomes divine more and more. I break that, I'm not understanding it, and it's very difficult to understand anything further of Gyan, and maybe even after some time there's departure. So that's the first step, the food, the drink, the addictions, external addictions, the celibacy. All of that is part of this first step of keeping the intellect clean and pure, keeping it divine. And we've all done that, and we're ready for Madhuban. We're here in Madhuban many times, maybe even. But what is the further aspect of the purification of the buddhi that's very, very important? And that is the ability to see good, the ability to seek goodness, which means that, of course, there are roses, but the roses come with the thorns. And now what am I going to see? It's my choice. Am I going to see the thorns, or am I going to see the roses? Which means I know that everybody has mixed sanskars. Who is there in Sangam Yuga who's perfect? The souls that have reached the end of their line of effort, they've gone beyond Sangam Yuga into the subtle region. So anybody and everybody in Sangam Yuga is moving towards perfection, but is not perfect. Full stop. And so there's beauty, there's greatness, there's speciality, there's wonder, there's magic, but there are also the thorns. And the roses are learning to deal with their thorns, which means that each one of us, as an effort maker, gradually recognizing what it is we need to deal with, and we're taking steps in that direction. Anybody who's a Brahmin is an effort maker. And so whether I've recognized what it is that's the thorn or I haven't yet recognized it, certainly I'm moving in that direction and making that effort. There was a very, very interesting set of murlis that Baba had spoken in August. Now, I don't usually remember chapter and verse like that. But August was the time when we had the European Teachers' Retreat. And just before the Teachers' Retreat, it was a whole series of murlis, maybe 8-10 murlis, in which Baba kept speaking about the tamasic intellect and the rajoguni intellect and the satoguni intellect. Tamoguni, rajoguni, satoguni, different levels of purity of intellect. And then Dadi compiled it all together in her head and then shared with us the essence of all. And tamasic, the tamoguni intellect, negative. Everybody else is to blame. The world's all wrong. The whole Brahmin family is against me. Nobody's cooperating with me. Nobody loves me. You know the story. And instead of the intellect using Gyan and Yoga and going through the process of cleansing and purification, and through that the sustenance of the self, the intellect dropping back into Kali Yuga, and the vision of Kali Yuga coming, seeing fault, seeing negativity, and that's the state. And what does it do to my own sustenance? Well, what it does is it destroys my happiness. I see fault, I see negativity, and my own happiness has gone. Can't stay together. And so what I have to learn to do is to recognize that this is what's happening, and a soul with jnana in the intellect will learn to step away from negative influences. Sometimes it's my own vision that becomes negative, sometimes it's company. When Baba talks about the influence of company, very important that I keep my intellect very clear and alert, and I can perceive what company is of benefit to me and what company is taking me away from my goal and Baba. It's not criticism of the other individual, but it's important to protect myself. If I can be with them and I can change their attitude, fantastic. But if instead of that, their attitude is influencing me, and the things that you're saying, drip, 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 it's poison, 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 and I'm going to absorb it. At some point, suddenly I'll find that I've actually taken on board the things that they've said. At first, maybe I thought, oh, this is nonsense, it's not like that. But I continue to hear the same story, and somehow it sort of filters through, and then it's caught me. And so to be very alert and choose the company that I keep. You can do it sweetly, you can do it gently, you can maybe do it without making a noise or a statement about it. But consciously choose the company you keep. Very important. And so make sure that I don't allow my intellect to be tamoguni. Next step, rajoguni, doubts, where I'm now questioning motive of my family, my friends, the seniors, the dadis, and it'll come to the point where I'll start questioning Baba. That influence keeps moving, moving, moving. It works like that. And again, it means that my happiness isn't stable, my stage isn't stable. Where I allow doubt to come into my mind because my intellect is influenced through that, then again there's no stability that I have, and weakness that comes in. And I also then begin to doubt myself. I can't trust people around me, I'm doubting them, critical of them, and that same vision is happening for myself too. And so to keep the intellect satoguni, to keep the intellect pure, it isn't a slow process to reach this stage. It's a process of decision. Baba's given me the gift of a divine intellect. I can choose what to see. I can choose whether my vision is focused on the roses or the thorns. And I have to make that choice for myself. It was very interesting 2 days ago when Baba was talking about attachments, and one sentence struck me deep. Baba said, how long does it take to conquer attachment? Baba said, it can take 1 second, or you can take a lifetime and still not do it. It can take till the end of the kalpa and you've still not done it. And within all of that, Baba said two other things, that it takes courage and it takes a clean and honest heart. And if you have a clean and honest heart and you have courage, you decide, I'm going to deal with this and finish. And there you go, you have Baba's help and you attain it. Same thing in this. Do I want to see negative stuff? Do I want to see things that are not useful for me? Or do I want to protect my intellect? And my intellect is my window on the world. It's my perception, and it's also what shapes my attitude. And so in a very conscious way, and the thing about intellect is that, again, it's a gift. I don't need to slowly work on it and purify it and cleanse it. The slow business is for sanskars. I haven't seen anybody change sanskars overnight. That does take time. But intellect, it's a gift. It does happen instantly overnight. It can be poisoned instantly also. And if I'm not recognizing it, then the sicker the intellect is, the longer the time I allow it to stay sick, the more difficult the effort to get it back into a state of good health. Just as with physical health, same story. But if I take the divine intellect as a gift and I protect it so that I don't allow anything negative to influence it or other things to seep into it, then this intellect of mine is going to keep me connected with God, it's going to carry me to God, and it's going to sustain me. And so the buddhi, my clarity, my perception, my understanding, my connection with God, everything depends on this. And in that state then, the perception of my own chart, to be able to see what's happening through the day and to keep checking back with my decision. If I've decided there's a particular stage I want to experience, I want to attain, then my buddhi will help me achieve that if I've looked after my buddhi well. I've kept it clean, I've kept it pure. And then this is again the reason why Amrit Vela is so important. And even if it's sleepy Amrit Vela, never mind. Even sleepy Amrit Vela is better than no Amrit Vela. And I've heard lovely stories from a number of souls who told me that, for years they've had sleepy Amrit Vela, but they persisted, they continued. And now suddenly, 18th January, the month of January, and they felt special blessings, and Amrit Vela is beautiful and powerful. And so a reminder that don't give up with anything, especially Amrit Vela. Just persist. But why Amrit Vela is so important? Because through the night, the intellect hasn't been in conscious control. It's been open to all the influences and vibrations through the night. And at a time of sleep, that's where, yes, I'm alive, everything is ticking on. But the conscious control of intellect hasn't happened at that point. And so Amrit Vela, and I'm waking up and I'm bringing the intellect back into conscious state of awareness so that now it does control everything. And I'm setting it in tune with God. I'm cleaning out the influences of yesterday so that again it's God's influence that works. And then, like Baba said, set your timetable. What consciousness is it that I want to maintain through the day? And it's taken more time to explain it in words than you actually have to do. You connect with Baba, and Baba does the rest. And then you spend a few moments and a picture will emerge in your mind of how you want to set the timetable, and each one different, every day different. Whichever way you take it, it's fine, but to create that sort of timetable for the self. The second thing that Medical Tsar told this person was, it's Maya's job to come. And so Maya's going to keep coming in a variety of different ways and forms and colors. But it's your job to have victory. Baba's children have been blessed with the blessings of victory. And so let Maya do her job and keep coming, and you do your job and you keep having victory. And so setting the timetable, and secondly, the blessings of victory. And actually there was a third lovely thing she said, and that was, Baba gives you a bracelet, the Rakhi, the bracelet. So Baba gives you a bracelet that's studded with jewels. And two most important jewels are the jewel of tolerance and the ability to face. And so keep these two jewels with you, and when Maya comes, then use these two jewels in particular. And so through the day, keep your state in that stage of self-respect that you've decided for yourself to keep. And at the end of the day, your chart. Just keep checking your chart. Let me go back again a little bit to this question of study, because the yoga, well, how to keep a chart of yoga is, in theory, pretty clear, and then in practice, whether we do it or we don't. But even if I don't do it when I'm back there, try doing it here, and it'll get you again into the right consciousness and the right frame. Try keeping a chart of how many minutes, it won't be more than that, how many minutes of remembrance you were able to have. Whether you keep a chart every hour or every 2 hours, try it in Madhuban. And even if you're here just for a short time, it's okay, give it a try. And if you're here for more than a few days, even better. But it'll get you into the awareness of how you need to just be giving attention to connecting with Baba, to having that remembrance. Otherwise, it slips away. And so the chart is really the only way to keep track of it properly. And once you've seen what's going on, then there'll be the motivation to keep Baba more with you. And then the study, I think for most souls, daytime is busy, busy, busy. But morning time, and even if it's not the same day's Murli that I have in my hands, it's okay. Maybe it's yesterday's Murli that I have in my hands. Maybe it's last week's Murli that I have in my hands. But something extremely beneficial is, after Amrit Vela, to read a Murli. Sometimes people also find it enormously valuable to read it before Amrit Vela. There's a person who's been in Gyan just a few years, and she told me she reads the Murli before she sits down in yoga, and she reads the Murli twice because she showers before, early, so showers about 3:30, and then 3:45 she sits with the Murli, and then again, after meditation, she reads the Murli twice. And this is a person who's just, a regular person. It's not a Maharathi, it's not a senior, but just Baba's child. And she's been in Gyan about 4 years, something like that, maybe 3. And reads the Murli twice after Amrit Vela, and then again listens to the Murli. And you can see when she's listening, she's all there, present, alert, not off in another dimension, but all there. And she tells me that every time she's listening or reading that Murli, so that means 3, 4 times at least, it's helping her understand how Baba thinks. And there's no way that she can understand it just hearing the Murli once. she feels she catches a little superficial bit from it, but it's only when she's actually given it that sort of attention. And so, new in Gyan, or longer time in Gyan, the foundation of study is the Murli. Other things is additional material, but that's not what it's actually all about. It's the Gyan, the Murli, that's the foundation. And so, why did Baba say this? What was the connection that Baba made? What was Baba really meaning when he said this? And even if you don't have access to the full Murli, it's okay. Because if, as you listen to a Murli, don't write everything, that's not useful. Write the things that touch you. A sentence that Baba said that's moving you, that's touching your heart, a new insight, like this thing about, how long does it take to conquer attachment? It was very interesting hearing that from Baba, 1 second or a whole lifetime. So every Murli has gems like that. So pick up even a few from each Murli and just write those things down. And maybe at the end of the Murli you've just got 5 sentences. Maybe it's 3 pages. Either way, it's okay. But then through the day, just keep looking back at your notes. And once you've done that a couple of times, looked back at your notes a couple of times, you'll pretty well remember what it is you've got in your notes. And what you've then done is captured the essence of the Murli in your intellect. When within a moment you can flick your mind's eye over, well, what did Baba say today? And even 4 points, 5 points emerge very clearly in front of you. Well, that's a treasure. And if it's still taking, oh goodness, what did Baba say today? Well, I'm sure it was something about the cycle. What did Baba say about the cycle? If it's sort of taking me a long time and it's a strain, I haven't really absorbed anything. But writing it, reading it, emerging it in my awareness, and then, because that's in your awareness, it's not just then in your notebook, but the Gyan has come to you and is with you, and the more deeply you let it stay with you and reflect on it, not even whizzing around, churning it, finding new insights, but just let it stay there gently. Just be with it and feel it. And what's beginning to happen is that you're beginning to absorb Gyan into your bloodstream. You're beginning to take the nourishment from the Murli. And so the point of all this, that the way to sustain the self is to find ways in which I can take direct sustenance from Baba's Murli. Anything else is scaffolding. It's here today and it'll be pulled down and it's gone tomorrow. It's not going to stay permanent. Service is wonderful, but it's not the foundation of sustenance for the self. It's a great way to stay out of mischief, but sometimes it gets you into mischief also. But service isn't a foundation for our life. Whatever it is I've taken from Baba, that attainment is that which I then use to serve others, to give to others. But it's not what service is about in terms of trying to sustain myself with that. I'll get into a problem if I treat service as a form of sustenance, because I'll find myself in a situation either in which there's a problem with sanskars, because service can't be alone, it's with others. You can try doing service alone for a short time, but within a very short time you'll find that it's not possible just to do it on your own. It has to be in cooperation with 1, 2, 5, 20, 100 others. And so either you'll find that if there isn't that inner sustenance and you're just working on service level, that there's then a clash of sanskars. It won't be possible to just be easy and light and say, it's okay, it's fine. But no, one gets hooked into things. Or the other is that my energy goes so much into service that I feel drained, and I don't feel that inner contentment and Baba's love, because then it's impacting my yoga, where, lots of things that were being asked for this morning are all connected, obviously, but this whole question of tiredness, well, what is it that's taking my energy? Why am I not able to have that inner reserve in which I'm taking power from Baba and it's God's energy that's keeping me going? Why am I using human physical energy? Because that's only limited, and that's going to get drained very fast, and I'm not going to be able to survive. In all the situations where there are the caring professions, it's the caring professions where people get stressed out the most, because they're giving, but there's nothing to replenish. And that's what happens on the field of service with Baba's children also. The desire to give and give and give, and yes, time, energy, everything is being spent in a worthwhile way, but it's not with the right consciousness. And so it's me giving, instead of me being an instrument to give. Difference. Me giving, me doing, and it's my energy that's gone and I'm exhausted. Me, an instrument, and I let Baba's energy work, and I simply am the instrument to let that happen. Well, I get the commission for that. I get the percentage of blessings for that, for making it happen. But it's Baba's energy that's working, not mine. And where the Gyan and Yoga isn't the foundation, and it's my desire to do things that's motivating the service, or it's on the external level, on any level at all in that way, then I'm exhausted. And instead of the visible fruit I should be receiving of happiness and power, what's happening is pressure and tension and conflict and a drain. It's never a situation that there's too much service. It's always me that's not doing the service in the right consciousness. And yes, of course, there's too much service. Service isn't going to stop until every soul has had God's message. So that's a huge agenda. The task is enormous. How am I going to be able to do it? But it's not just me, and it's not me. It's Baba's task. Baba's going to do it. And if I can simply be an instrument, then many others will come forward and cooperate. And it won't be a burden and pressure for me on my own to do it. So service isn't a foundation. It's Gyan and Yoga that is the foundation. Because there'll always be situations, not just of the conflict of sanskars coming up, but there'll be situations where I say, but there's no service. That will also happen. And I'm not seeing the possibilities of service, but I'm actually saying that there's no service. And on an external, visible level, it'll feel that, yes, there are blocks and I can't do anything. There isn't anything to be done. But if I get the Gyan and Yoga foundation sorted out, then service is going to be automatic and it's going to be happening very, very easily. And so my sustenance has to be my study of Gyan, and that's also the way in which I love Baba more deeply, because I appreciate what Baba has given me very, very deeply. Without the focus and attention on study and seeing what is it that Baba's giving me each day through the Murli, how am I going to love Baba more? The question of loving Baba is when I feel I've benefited, and how am I benefiting? From what Baba has said. And so Baba's Murli is the way to deepen my love for Baba. It's also a natural thing that you remember the things that have been said, if it's been said by people you love. Sometimes other things get forgotten, but if something's been said by a person you love, it stays in your heart forever, forever, forever. Same thing. What did Baba say today? I just see Daddy, and 11 o'clock at night, Daddy's still full of, what did Baba say today? Morning time, 5 o'clock in the morning, what did Baba say today? But 11 o'clock at night, and it's still the same, what did Baba say today? So that love and intoxication for Baba's versions, that enables us to come very, very close to God and enables yoga to be powerful, so that then my loving connection with God is becoming stronger and stronger. So these are the things that came to mind in terms of what you can do here in Madhuban, but what you can do after leaving Madhuban to keep yourself safe and to make yourselves into powerful instruments. Bharat, they're laughing and saying that when Dadiji says collect 100,000 together, knock several zeros off, and that's the sort of audience you get abroad. So where India would get 5,000, maybe we'd get 50. Where India would get 50,000, maybe we'd get 500. And so it's a situation where there's a lot of service that needs to happen. Lots and lots of people don't know about Baba, but it's not going to happen just by running around. It's going to happen through the right vibrations. I think the souls that Baba wants to be his mic souls, the souls that Baba's saying, where are the air quality souls? Those souls are going to be touched by our vibrations. And so our vibration has to now reach that very, very pure, refined state where it's the arrow that hits the target. Let me stop here, and we've got just a few minutes in which we can see if there's questions. Okay, after this then the next person can ask a question using the mic, but I'll just repeat Tony's question. A chart of remembrance. Well, here in Madhuban we're talking about Gyan, we're talking about Baba, and so easy to have remembrance the whole day, but what does it mean to have a chart here? One is just that sort of awareness of Baba. But the other is where I know that I'm actually linked with Baba. And so even within the last hour and a bit, I've been talking about God, I've been talking about Murli and so on, it's all Gyan. But remembrance, if I were to try and put a percentage of what sort of remembrance was it wasn't remembrance in the stage of yoga, except for the few minutes of traffic control. It was more an awareness of Baba. So if I were writing a chart about the last hour or so, I'd say maybe 10-15 minutes of remembrance rather than an hour. It was an hour of Gyan, but actual remembrance was maybe 10-15 minutes within that. That's one way to look at it, and where we are sharing experiences. And maybe sometimes as we share experiences, we move into silence very automatically. And there's that sweet exchange of drishti in silence. Now, out of 20 minutes of conversation, if that's happened for 2-3 minutes, now that's the yoga. The rest is wonderful, and it's helping. It's not a waste of time. It's very constructive. Because the more I engage my intellect in Gyan, whether talking about it with somebody or just deeply thinking about it myself, the more powerful the tool that I have with which to connect with God. And the easier it is to make a very deep connection. It's something that we've all experienced. You've had a good exchange of gyan, then the few minutes of yoga are very powerful. Otherwise, maybe even you've had 30 minutes of yoga, but it's been sort of in and out. 1 minute you're connected, the next minute there's a few other thoughts, but you've had gyan, and then you have yoga, and that's powerful.
I just want more of the same, really. So, soul consciousness, if there is that feeling that you're shining from the centre of the forehead, where does that come in terms of percentage of remembrance?
I used to keep a chart of A, soul consciousness, and B, yoga. So it was like two separate subjects for me. So one is the awareness of the self, and the other is the connecting with God. And so again, if I were to just use the last hour as an example, I'd say that my percentage of soul consciousness within the last hour was maybe 80%. So that awareness is what was allowing me to share. But the connection with God, that's another percentage. Yeah. And there's no hard and fast rules about these things. It's not an examination paper in which you're going to be tested, but just a little device to just make me aware of what I'm doing with my time and my energy and my thoughts and my mind. It'll be good to close with 5 minutes powerful yoga at the end. So just one last thing that I'd like to just add within the whole subject of sustaining the self. When Baba says happiness is the thermometer with which Baba and you can see your own stage, it's very true. Whatever Baba says is true. But yet it's a very simple way in which you can check whether you're doing things as you should or whether other things have distracted you. And if I can check my quality of happiness and my level of happiness, and if it's not on the level that I want it to be at, why not? And of course, the easiest thing is to say because of this, this and this. But it never is. It always is that I didn't actually use gyan and yoga in the way that Baba wants me to. And if I check this quickly, I'll be able to put it right quickly. Otherwise, human nature of blame is so incredibly deep that my happiness is gone, and I haven't realized that it's because I'm not paying attention to Gyan and Yoga. And every time I have one thought of blame for another, and I let that thought carry on, I become convinced of it. I convince myself that that's true. And I'm quite far away from God at that point, because my attention is by then focused totally outside. Instead of sorting things out and putting things right here, I've moved far away. And it's then time to sort things out very quickly. But I can very quickly put things right if I'm checking my own thermometer of happiness. If I begin the day with God's love and happiness, it's right. If it's gone, where did it go? Let's have some. Yes, yes. If I'm reading the consciousness that this is Baba speaking to me, the Supreme Teacher, absolutely, that's yoga.